Economic Development Committee agenda for February 15th at 9 a.m. Members of the committee are Michael Connor, Gladys Blackmore, John Laners, Mayor Jackie Clayton. Call the meeting to order. And our first order of business, or are there any additions to the agenda before I? Seeing none, our first motion, I'd like to ask someone to ask if we can go in camera. John Laners? Yes, please. Call for the vote.
Mayor Clinton's in favor.
Okay, carried. Thank you. If we could
I can hear you guys.
Okay, thank you very much. We're moving on to delegation. And Landsman Properties, 3.1. Please introduce yourselves.
Thank you, Chair O'Connor. My name's Dan Wong. I'm with Bearstone Associates Engineering, and this is Janet Gibbs with Landsman Properties.
Hi, Janet.
Meet you.
So we're here to speak on the Wapiti House site report in the agenda today. 6 months ago, we were here at City Council talking about the supervised consumption site project, the development permit that was applied for at Ouapi House. And in that report, or in our presentation, we'd asked the city to look at two issues. One was drainage issues that was experienced at Aberdeen Centre. And the second one was the changing of the access and fencing of the site that was offered up by Director Manuel as a possible solution to dealing with the street engaged and transient people that have been creating a little bit of a nuisance on the property. So I'll speak to the first issue of drainage first, and I did submit a couple of figures in advance that we could share with those online and with City Council. So the first figure that we have, I don't know if we can put that up or not.
Yeah,
Oh,
put it on the plastic.
I could put it up here, like so.
Turn it sideways if that's appropriate.
This way looks
you.
better. So this is an aerial photo of the site. The drainage issues that we've been experiencing are identified by the blue arrows. So what's happening on the site is there's these snow piles which are piled up on the properties to the north and at Wapiti House. And the snow piles are melting and coming down that lane along the north property line of Aberdeen Centre. And they're supposed to make their way out of the lane onto 98th Street here. The big issue is that the owner was forced to build a concrete curb and swale to collect that water and to try to drive it out. That swale and curb only sits 3 feet off of the property, and they've been experiencing flooding because of it. There's a significant amount of water that comes out from this lane. This is water that's coming from other properties, not just their own. And the problem is that it's so flat at the northwest corner of their building that water is getting in. Originally, they experienced one big flood, and it caused them to file an insurance claim. They were able to mitigate some of that with some waterproofing on the side and whatnot, but that hasn't solved the problem completely. The problem is that there's only 2 inches of elevation between where the water's coming in and where it can hit the building. So if you get an ice dam that's more than 2 inches high, water starts pouring in. So the second area of concern is right at the access of Wapiti House, shown here on the map. And the problem that's happening there is we know there's a drainage easement that's been registered Untitled, but the water basically flows from the northeast to the southwest, so it kind of goes in this direction. That's the natural drainage pattern of this area. Water comes along here, comes out this access, and it travels along what used to be Montrose Ave, heads west, and then it hits a little catch basin, which is over here, which was the old catch basin when that was a road. Now that it's private property, it's not really desirable to have that water coming through their property. So the two potential fixes that we've suggested in these areas, I'll start with this one. This one, when 97th when 97 A Street, when there's work planned on it, what could happen is you could fix the crossfall here to drive the water just south a little bit. So there's a crown in the road right now which keeps it up on this north side. But what you could do is just tilt the pavement a little bit, get it to hit this curb. This orange arrow here, set series of arrows, is the proposed drainage pattern that we'd like to see. Once it hits that curb, then it's all on public property, and that just solves the issue right there. On the north side with the lane, what we're proposing is that the swale, instead of drainage coming right at the property line, you could build a swale down the center of the lane, which is the way most lanes are built these days. This is an old way of doing things, and that creates an additional 10 feet separation instead of 3 feet separation, so a total of 13 feet before the water gets you. You also gain a couple extra inches, so now you have 4 inches instead of 2 inches of elevation for the overflow. So if I flip over to the next page, you can actually see some pictures that we took. So this first picture shows, you can see the ice where all the water is coming, and this blue arrow again is where all the water is kind of draining into their property. And then it hits this concrete swale here, and there's some sandbags here. So the Aberdeen Center's roof also drains in this area, so this is their own water. But this combined with what's coming down the lane just creates a big mess here. This is really flat, and the elevation actually from here to here is about an inch. So it can easily come back towards the building. So again, we're suggesting put the swale down at the orange line, drive the water out this way, and it creates a much better flow or a better path to protect this building. It ends up protecting both of these buildings, actually. Again, here's another view of that same thing from looking north. This is just a picture of the snow piles that are up there, and they've melted significantly. This has been a bad year for accumulation of snow, and then the freeze and thaw cycle, which is why you see all the ice in the lane. This is a picture of the front of the building, which is the west side of the building, and it just shows how flat this is. There's almost no slope from the edge of this sidewalk out to the road, which is why when the city built this sidewalk, the pink part, they created a little bit of a swale down the middle. Like, for those people out there who don't know what a swale is, it's just a V-shaped depression in the hard surface to try to collect the water. Obviously, it's not working. You don't see any ice build up in the middle of that, so nothing's being collected at that point. This is the east access, or the access into Ouapi House on their west side, and so we're looking east at this point. The water comes around here, and then it just follows this road. There's a little bit of crown here, and so what we're saying is you can shave that down, let the water drive itself to the south. So those are the two suggestions we're making to deal with these drainage issues. And like I said, these drainage issues have caused flooding in the building. They continue to cause flooding. We need to get those dealt with. The second issue was the access into Ouapi House. The problem that our clients here are experiencing is just Wapiti House clientele. When they get out in the morning, they're just naturally forced to come out this access and walk right through this parking lot. Because there's only a couple of places they're going. They're either going to the Friendship Center to get their meal in the morning, or they're going to the St. Lawrence Center, which is down here. In both cases, they cut through this public road access, and they either come down or they come across. Now, 90% of the people coming out of there are they're fine, they're easy to deal with. It's that 10% which cause problems. They have mental issues, they're unstable. Our clients deal with these really intense issues continually. So they've been working with city administration on potential solutions. They met with Director Manuel last year, and this was one of the suggestions that was offered up, which is close off this access, fence it off, and it has to be a very strong fence. It can't just be a chain link fence, because these guys come equipped with bolt cutters. They have cut through chain link fence before when this was a chain link fence, and now it's a steel fence so that they can't get through.
This one is a chain link.
Oh, this one's chain link. Sorry, it was this one that we're talking about, yeah, in the alley. So if we could make that a fairly rugged fence, and then change the access over to this southeast corner, what ends up happening is you still have access into Ouapi House, but because you have this area fenced off, it's driving your foot traffic this way instead of right through the property. So as a good neighbor, we're hoping that the city is willing to do something like that. The city does own Wapiti House land. It owns, the road right away. It owns the majority of the land in this area. The city, that's why we've come to you guys to ask you to do something about this.
Okay. Thank you very much for coming today. I'm open for questions. Councillor Laners, and then Blackmore.
Thank you, Mr. Wong. Insightful. I'll ask the no-brainer. I think I already know the answer, but was that's an existing lane that's beside you, or is it or land that you guys own that has
This lane up here is existing.
all the way to the end, right?
Yeah.
And so there's no opportunities for any catch basins along 98th Street to tie that into. I assume that's been looked into as well.
There's one here,
Oh, I can't
and
see
then
your
there's
pen.
there's one.
You're off the map, off the screen, please.
Sorry, there's one right here, and then there's one about an equal distance to the north of that lane, but nothing in the middle, nothing right at the edge to collect any of that.
There's no line there. Like there's no line down that street. Like could they add a catch basin there?
They could. I think that's a question for your administration because there is a cost to doing that. Of
Well,
course.
a swale is cost too, because to get the water to the swale, you probably end up having to repave some of that lane a little bit, maybe, unless you're just talking about catching the stuff from the north. But the stuff from the south won't go there unless you repave that lane a little bit too. So there's that. That all sounds to be more expensive than digging a hole at that spot if there's a line that's right there. But so if there's a line that goes up 98th Street, that's interesting to know. And on your if you're going all that way to do that fence, does it make sense to go further south to the end of the grassy area to kind of keep forcing it out even further, or is it just seems to me like you're just going to come around the corner and people do tend like the new access to me. I'm struggling with that because if people don't naturally go there, they're not going to want to go there. They're going to want to go in the direction they're going to go. So, pushing them out a little further to the south maybe might make a bit more sense. But
I believe, obviously the further south the fence could go would be more beneficial to Aberdeen Center. But the crux of the problem is that they're being forced or they're being encouraged to walk through the parking lot where the location is now. In terms of where the new access is, if you were to drive by there today, you'll see tire tracks across there. People drive up along that path anyway. I don't know who it is that's driving there, but I definitely see tire tracks there.
thank you very much.
Councillor Bosch.
Thank you for the
Sorry, were you?
presentation. Thank you, Chair O'Connor. I definitely see a need for a fence, something. Every day when I drive through your space, I notice the traffic that you're talking about. I hear the complaints from that traffic to the public. Even on Facebook, you see issues where people have been scared, and it's not right. It's not right for you to have to deal with that. I think as a city council, this has been a long time. Councillor O'Connor said a year ago you came in and talked about this. So I think we need to think about this and do it, sooner than later. I don't want to see another year for you like that. If access is the issue, then we have to really look at the access part. I don't think fencing is the issue. That can go up fairly easily. But I think we have to concentrate on the access of how we move traffic from that point. But I don't think I'd like, as a council, to see you dealing with this over and over and over again. Your rates for rental or lease, I know, are an issue because of the traffic that you have. And, for me, I wouldn't want, my wife or my daughter to have to deal with that daily either. So hopefully we can be quicker with this than a year already.
Okay. Do you want to step in? I've got Gladys Blackmore first, Councillor Blackmore.
I think I could just, in regard to the fence, I think I should remind council, because we have a new council, there is an approved capital project for fencing in this particular area. Now, the intent of that fencing would be to extend the fencing that the Aberdeen has, our landsman, has put in place that would run north-south, much like Councillor Lainers had suggested. The barrier to installing that fence is obviously that is the only access point that exists presently. Oh, I suppose there's the alleyway as well, but that is the primary access point for the site. So with alternative access, if it is achieved, certainly the capital funds related to the fence exist. So I just wanted to make those councillors that hadn't previously been aware of that, aware that we have an existing capital fund for that.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Blackmore and then Councillor O'Connor.
I have two questions for you, Mr. Wong. The first is you've said a few times during your presentation that when city is in that area working, they could do these things. Do you have a time frame in mind where it's something that you want to see this done before?
That was in regards to the drainage, but yes, this north side needs to be done right away. This part, I think Landsman and Aberdeen Centre can be more patient on that one, mainly because there is water coming in, but this water isn't what's flooding their building right now, so it's not an immediate concern. It's just something that they'd like to look at because they also own these lots here, and at this point, there's no plan to do any development here. But in the future, if they do decide to develop here, you're now driving water towards those two lots.
Okay. And then in regards to the access, newly aligned access that you have in there, does that line up pretty much to the east of where the proposed road alignment would be, should that ever be constructed? Do you understand what I'm asking, right?
Yes. Though I'm sure those plans aren't made public yet, so this is more for schematic purposes than anything. We're just saying that the access should be closer to that southeast, just to create as much separation as possible.
And would that include sidewalks for walking, or
Ideally, yes.
ideally?
Yeah. The second issue that we did notice along here was because of the amount of snow this year and the freeze thaw, the fact that city crews couldn't get through to clear these roads. The private business, of course, has the ability to clear their parking lot. So their parking lot was the best cleared path for all of these people to travel back and forth on. So, without a sidewalk that would be clear, we're going to create, again, a massive pedestrian migration path.
And again, timelines that you're looking at for the new access, the fencing and the new access?
Yeah, we've been waiting a year already at least, so as soon as possible.
Okay.
We actually were told July of last year, and then it was changed that it would be done by September. And it did not happen.
Okay, does someone on administration want to reply to that it didn't happen last July?
Yeah, certainly. So administration, as was mentioned, the capital funds for the fencing exist. So our ability to execute the fencing was a possibility. Now, initially, I was focusing on closing the alleyway. But to accomplish closing the alleyway, we would have to work with the private landowner to the north, which we've been doing. However, that project faced some delays as well. There has been work conducted by administration in regard to the access on Rotary, but that's contingent with other private landowners, or not necessarily landowners, but land commitments regarding that road alignment and ultimately what council's going to decide to do with that. So there's a number of factors that are coinciding with one another and affecting one another that have led to the stage that we're at right now. So certainly there's a willingness on administration's part to rectify this. We certainly, I think anybody that looks at that aerial that we're seeing right now can completely understand why you see traffic patterns that run east to west and west to east through that Aberdeen site. And, you know, there's obviously some solutions to that, but they're not all simplistic.
Okay. I'm first, and then I'll let you in, Mr. Councillor Laners. One of the things I'm concerned about is water coming from an adjacent property coming through an existing property. And that puts undue pressure on that property for overground water. And so my first question is to administration, is that lane, is that a utility lane?
Through the chair, it is both for vehicles and utilities. There's power and other utilities in there, so it's both.
I think there's power overhead.
Yeah.
And there's probably, would there be telephone lines and other services in the middle of that lane?
Through the chair, the TELUS or a cable would be overhead as well. Typically, it's the gas that's underground. I could have a quick boo and find out for you. Oh, no, I can't because I'm on the public base. When I get to my report, I do have the utilities turned on.
Yes, I saw that in your report. So we'll just set one aside. Where I'm going with my conversation and where Councillor Laners had brought it up is that I really think that this lane needs to be able to divert the water from coming from the north and going across the property onto the landsman property. And so to deal with that, I think you have to tie in to it with a catch basin at the end of that lane. And the reason I'm saying that is I've had to on a number of projects in the past is that if you do not divert the water, you're going to have a problem. And this problem is not going to go away. I personally attended my company 2 floods in the years that I was operating Rainbow, and that was is problematic, and it's not going away. So I think you have to manage overground flow of water, and that lane, I think, is your opportunity to do so. And so that should be a more aggressive swale than what Mr. Wong has suggested, and just from my experience. Councillor Laners.
Thank you, Councillor Connor. So I said something stupid before. I thought that access was for pedestrian access. Obviously, it's for car access, and Director Manuel pointed out that we still need to have access, and that access doesn't look cheap to me. So I'm wondering, is it possible to take that fence where you have it, and I wish I had the drawing. So instead of going around where it goes, have it go straight across to 97 to the west side of 97A Street, and then across over to 101st Avenue, and that way they could still maintain access to this using the existing site instead of where it is there. At least it would force the traffic, foot traffic, out to 101st Avenue. Then I don't know if that's maybe I need to come up there and take it with my pen. There you go. Yeah.
So here,
Move it to the left. You're there, and then down.
so this is also the access for Aberdeen Center too?
The only access.
Yeah, the only access. So this is public road right away. So it's the shared access between Ouapi House and Aberdeen, and this is all treated as one lot, even though it's subdivided up into different lots. So this is really the only way in, is what we're saying.
Mm. Okay, unless you maybe had another access where that just to the right of that parked car there, to the bottom there, that one there, right? Being an access there, it's much shorter than that blue one. Just something to think about.
Okay. Anything else? Like, is this a problem? And I direct my question to infrastructure. Is this a possibility of working on this lane? So we have two issues. So the fence, moving it south, I think that's probably one of the best solutions. And the other one, I think we need to do something with where snow is put or where that lane is. So I think that needs to be looked at. Is that something we can direct to? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair O'Connor. I think we've heard what the delegation is looking for, and I would suggest that council could make some decisions after we have the staff report that does speak to some of the issues that have been presented by the delegation.
Thank you. With that, anything else?
No, sir. Thank you very much for listening to our presentation.
You're welcome. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah. So, meeting.
Thank you. First, we'll go to reports. 4.1, Director's Service Area Report.
Thank you, Chair O'Connor. We'll start off with economic development. The economic development team is busy working with the Growing the North conference, which starts up next week from February 22nd to 24th. Registration is still open at growingthenorth.com. The team is also meeting with Invest Canada this week to discuss aligning their messaging and investment attraction efforts. And with the economic recovery grants, since the last update, 4 training grants have been approved under the Economic Recovery Grant Program. In engineering services, there is a new RFP for the 2022-2023 traffic signal inspection program. A tender has went out for the 108th Street upgrades north of 132nd Avenue. This will connect into the county development where Whispering Ridge is. A tender has also went out for phase 2 of the road rehabilitation program. And since the last meeting, the RFP for the Range Road 64 drainage project has been awarded. In transportation, the milder weather and the freeze-thaw cycles that we've seen has triggered a work on potholes throughout the city, as well as the 4th round of residential clearing to control some of the ice issues that we're having specifically in the residential areas. We've had the challenge of being unable to keep ice in our rinks and unable to keep the ice off of our roads has been the the challenge with the heat here. With respect to the rinks, we do have crews going back out to them now that ice making conditions are returning, so that hopefully within the next few days there's skatable ice out there for people to enjoy that again. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Okay. Any questions? Councillor Burke.
Yeah, thank you, Chair O'Connor. So when you mentioned that we're on the 4th round, you're talking about this calendar year or this winter?
This winter, it will be the 3rd round of this fiscal year.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Bosch.
Thank you, Councillor O'Connor. Where are you at, would you say, with the ice removal in residential, like percentage-wise? Are you like halfway through or?
We're on day 2 of what we would have 10 days scheduled. However, you know, due to the melt, there's a lot of ice that there's a lot of bare sections in residential. So there's a combination of issues. The deeper you get into a residential area, the less traffic there's been on it and tends to be larger ruts. So those areas are going to take a little bit longer. Areas closer to the arterials or collector roads tend to have less just due to the amount of traffic that's been on them. So, you know, hypothetically, by the end of the day, 20%, my understanding, talking to the manager in that area, that it's going a little better than expected. So we may do, we may be ahead of that right now, but I think until the end of the week, I wouldn't want to make any firm predictions on that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I actually saw a grader on the other side of 84th coming out of the subdivision there, so that's good news. You wouldn't believe the number of calls that I've taken over the last week or two. We'll now go to 4.2, development incentives. Keep you on your toes there, Chad.
I'm just here this morning with a follow-up report regarding the Development Incentives and Grants Program. Get that brought up here. Coming. So the presentation will follow. They're working on it here. So it's just a follow-up to a 6-month it's a follow-up to the 6-month summary report that we presented January 18th, so at which time Council directed administration to bring a report on the reasons why some applications have been denied. So just for a little bit of background, recall that Council approved the DIG program policy June of 2021, and the DIG program officially launched or opened to applications on July 28th, 2021. So we have 6 months of history. So I'll summarize as Matt's working on the tech here. So we've received to date 26 inquiries. Drag this to,
I would.
yeah. Oh, there we go. So we can go there. Okay. Thank you, Matt. So recall that there were 5 separate incentives available under the suite of the DIG program. So to date, we've had 26 inquiries, and I'll run through this summary chart here. On the left-hand side is approved applications. On the right-hand side is sort of the catch-all for all the other inquiries. So to date, we've had 2 municipal fee rebate applications. I'm going to go to there, that will help. So 2 municipal fee rebate applications and 3 business revitalization applications. Those have been approved. So in total, we've got about $62,000 in committed funding to date, as well as 1 application approved under business retention and expansion. So that comes with a $184,000 tax rebate estimate. So we've actually received 9 applications. 6 of them are accounted for here under the approved column. We've had 3 that were not approved, and I'll speak to those in a moment. Those have been added to the ineligible category here. So on top of the 9 applications that we've received, we've had 11 additional inquiries. Those are discussing specific projects. And of those, we've got 5, and I'm happy to say 1 for each of the DIG program opportunities. We have 5 inquiries that, if they came to fruition, they are probable to meet the eligibility requirements of the DIG program and would be approved. And that leaves us then with 6 inquiries that have been deemed ineligible. So I'll further break that down. On the municipal fee rebate, this ineligible program or project, and this residential infill one, those were the same project. They were going to stack those grants, which they can do for these 2 grants. That project had started prior to a reimbursement being signed, a reimbursement agreement. And that one, you'll note, was denied. It was appealed, and council recently upheld that decision, so that application was denied for those 2. On the business revitalization, we've had 2 that were ineligible. Both were ineligible because they were maintenance projects. So they weren't new construction. They were repaving parking lots and some foundation repairs. So those were not eligible. And then I'll skip down to the residential infill. So we had one that was, into business retention and expansion, where there's been a total of 5 that are deemed ineligible. One of those was because it was a building that the city actually owns, so it's a tax-exempt building. So we can't issue a tax rebate for a tax-exempt building. So that leaves us now with 4, and I would say if there's a theme developing out of the DIG program, it's that these 4 inquiries that we have deemed ineligible all are related to an interpretation of the infill description. They've all been projects that were proposing new builds in new areas, new development areas, whereas the intention of the DIG program was really to incent redevelopment or building on a site that had a previous use. So I'll get into some semantics here in terms of, remember, there's 2 ways to be eligible for the business retention and expansion grant. So the first is through an adaptive reuse project, and that's fairly straightforward in terms of it being a reuse of a pre-existing structure. So the example I always use on this is the old Canadian Tire building. If it was repurposed into a multi-tenant building, that would qualify under an adaptive reuse project. Now, the infill development is the other way that you can qualify. So the infill development, for the purposes of the DIG program, the definition is an infill development refers to the development of vacant or underutilized commercial or industrial parcels which were developed at least 20 years ago and therefore don't require further extension of infrastructure. So I'll provide an example here before I go back to the summary. So we had one application under the Business Retention and Expansion Grant, which was for a new professional services building. And that application was denied because that was being built in the Railtown District. So the Railtown District is not considered an infill area based on the age of that development. So it has not been predominantly developed 20 or more years ago. That development actually, I think the first Tuscan Square, I think, started that one in about 2007, 2008. So that is not an old infill area, more than 20 years old, is the determination. So that project, the professional services building in Railtown, that was, I guess, the application denied at this point. The project itself was good. It was just essentially the wrong area. If had that project been built on or proposed to be built on a lot that had been previously developed, and there's many of those, even I'll use Central Business District as an example. There's likely about 30 lots within that region that were previously developed that a project such as this would have been eligible for, would have been approved. So based on the fact that it was the Railtown District, and that is a newer area, that project was denied, that application was denied. And then, so Of the four, that was one of them. The other three are the exact same scenario, only different areas. So we've had projects, inquiries anyway, regarding projects in Westgate West, Trader Ridge, and an area within the Southeast Area Structure Plan. So it was the same situation. Those were new builds in what we consider new areas. They did not qualify as an infill project, and therefore those inquiries were told they were likely not eligible. And they were given the advice that they could still apply. However, they did not appear to meet the criteria of the DIG program based on the infill definition. And so because they're new projects and they're not redevelopment in an infill area, so that's really, the DIG was purposely designed that way, to focus on redevelopment versus development in new areas. So just in summary then, in terms of the 5 programs, we've had 6 approved applications. We've committed about $246,000 towards those projects. And that's to incent an estimated $8.9 million worth of new construction in the city this year. So we are, I'm happy to report we're still getting inquiries. We receive DIG inquiries, not quite daily, but on a regular basis. And we expect we'll be seeing more applications in 2022 than we did in the first 6 months of the program. I'll pause the summary there, and if there's any questions, I'm happy to.
Yes, Councillor Berg.
Yeah, thank you. So just 2 quick questions. When we have a target of, I think, 132 million, is there a lifespan on that? Is that annually, or is that over the course of 4 or 5 years, or what's the goal?
So through Chair O'Connor, yes. So the tax rebate incentives, of which there's 2, have a 5-year application window. So in December of 2025 is when that application window expires. And the business revitalization and the 2 residential programs all expired December of 2022. So the 132 million was intended for up to 5 years of application time.
Great, thanks. And then just more of a comment. As I sit here and listen to the presentation, I'd be open to something like a sliding scale. If the ultimate goal is to do development, but also incentivize redevelopment, like a sliding scale could be 100% for exactly what we're talking about. But say something like Railtown, which is near to the core of the city, it's not a suburb. You know, maybe we scale that at 50%, and something like Trader Ridge would be scaled to 25%, which is new development outside of the core. So that's just something that I'm sitting here thinking that, you know, I think it's worth discussion. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? I see not online. Oh, sorry, I keep doing that. Sorry, Councillor Blackmore.
Clearly, I'm not wearing a bright enough color today because I've been dissed a few times. Okay. In my experience, infill is usually defined as an area that falls within a certain border, not necessarily an area that is connected to a timeline. I'm curious why the 20-year development definition was added to that, because anything that would fall within a certain defined limit around the city core seems to me should qualify as, in other circumstances, would qualify as infill.
So through the chair, so when we were analyzing the different development areas that were brought online, so the ones that were 20 years or older, we did identify those as being fully or mostly developed, and so they were now at an age where some of those properties were becoming vacant or needing revitalization. And further to the point, when we looked at developing area maps in terms of this is an infill area, this is not, we ended up, and when I say we, this was engineering services and planning and development and assessment, and we had quite a team weighing the options of going both ways. We weren't able to actually come up with specific maps. And the reason for that, I remember the Richmond industrial area, for example. There's 4 or 5 vacant properties that would qualify within the Richmond boundaries. There is one significant property within Richmond that was kind of a residual, it's not even a lot, it's the remainder of that quarter, that would not actually qualify as a vacant lot under this definition. So we couldn't actually create a Richmond infill area because 5 properties would qualify, 1 wouldn't. So we had to make the decision to essentially, when an application comes in, we look at the lots on a per lot basis for that very reason.
Okay, thank you. I'm seeing nobody in the queue. Then we will move on. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Sheldon. And we will now go to 4.3.
Sorry,
and,
Chair O'Connor.
yes,
I'd like to make a motion to receive the report for information.
yes. Would you be able to do that, Mayor?
Just did. Thank you.
Call the question. That was carried unanimously. And we'll move on to 4.3, the Wapiti House site. And we'll direct that over to Ms. Donnelly.
Thank you, Chair. So at the September 14th, 2021 Infrastructure and Economic Development Committee meeting, concerns with the Wapiti House development were presented. Committee directed administration to bring back a report regarding potential fencing, site access, and stormwater management for the Wapiti House site. So I do have some maps in the report and put them on screen. Thank you. Zoom in. I'm just going to zoom in. It looks like it's a bit hard to see up on the screen. So to respond to the request, background information on how we got here is needed. In 2006, the city and the owners of Aberdeen Building agreed to a land swap to facilitate the consolidation of to create the lot and construct, I guess we were going to construct Wapiti House. It also included realignment of a road. A subdivision was registered in 2008 to create the lot, and that's kind of what's up on screen. This is the first subdivision that was registered, and this top piece is the lot, and this bottom piece is what became the road. It's registered as a road right away. This subdivision eliminated a portion of lane that was at the top here and consolidated with these single-family homes. So an agreement was then registered on the Montrose site, and this diagram, Schedule C in the report, kind of shows where that agreement was registered, and that was to maintain access from this now dead-ended lane back to a public road with 97A Street. So that is currently on the title. In 2015, the subdivision was registered to address the closure of Montrose Avenue and also the extension of 101st Avenue. Agreements protecting existing utilities, because there's quite a few in there, and drainage and access were registered on these newly created lots. And this is the lot lines that you see today when you look at the mapping. And it's Schedule A in that report. So past decisions impact the potential for fencing, site access, and stormwater management. So just going back to the Wapiti House, because the request was specific to that. The Wapiti House drains to public land and has a lot grading plan that meets current practices. There are, and I did hear what was said earlier, and there are concerns. There has been efforts by both the city and Aberdeen Centre to improve drainage in the area. Elevations are established in this area based on those past practices. So it's not ideal. However, it does appear to work on the surface. There is potential to improve drainage with future road improvements. Administration, whenever we're doing a full rehab, we always look for opportunities to make improvements, to bring infrastructure up to standard practice or near to that practice. In these older areas, it's just something that we're always looking to try and to do. So I wanted to make you aware of that. Removal of site access from the lane needs to take into consideration how vehicles will turn around. An agreement could be registered with a different property owner to allow that to occur in a different manner. And there is that's an opportunity to explore. And I did hear Director Manuel indicate there's been some discussions around that. Relocation of the site access to 97A Street to 101st Avenue is also a potential with a future road improvement project, as long as the lane has been addressed. So fencing is really restricted to restrict pedestrian movement from people using the vehicle pathways is a kind of a broader issue. Administration has initiated a process to deal with this old, I didn't show it very well, I'll go back up, sorry. So you can see east of 97A Street, this here is a road right-of-way that was registered based on plans for a couplet, and that couplet plan has been abandoned. So the city administration has initiated the process to look at closing this and then moving forward with, okay, what does the road network need to look like? At this time, we haven't got further than looking at closing it. So this report is being brought forward for information, and if you had any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Okay. Any questions, Councillor Laners?
Thank you. Ms. Donnelly, do you know when 98th Street is scheduled for rehab, i.e. to do some catch basin work or whatever at that time? Is it 5, 10 years from now? Who knows?
Through the chair, we have been looking at it. It's not ready yet for a full rehab. The soonest we'd be looking at is probably in 3 years. So that 3 to 5 window, because we'd probably be looking at a full rehab, and we'd look at trying to drop this curb line. If we can drop the curb line, that would improve drainage. There has been discussions, I understand as well, of trying to bring in a storm catch basin. But of course, surface drainage during a major event is overland. And so ideally you want both to work.
Yeah, I think the clients, yeah, ideally you do, right? I think some of the clients' problems is such minimal grade, any kind of inflection like ice or anything like that causes problems. But it is a pre-existing problem, so it's been like that forever, and both parties have known about this since the time it was built. So it's not you know, it's not a new problem. It's not surprising, and so anyway, yeah, that may be the time to look at that when you do. And if it's 3 to 5 years away, that's probably when you're going to put it into that cost. Do you have any idea what that new access cost would be for that tying in from Aberdeen Road? I guess it would be on the east side of Wapiti House to the parking lot. Do you have any idea what that costs?
Through the chair, we've done some really high-level preliminary work to look at extending 101st Avenue to the east. It probably kind of in the magnitude of 400,000. It would involve removing that old road that has not been maintained or utilized in any way. There might be some interim measures that are looked at, but it is something I'd recommend we would do further work, looking at what's going to happen in the area and then bring back potentially at a later date.
And from an engineering perspective, I don't have your drawing in front of me again. Maybe you could bring it up on the screen. So in the middle of 101st Avenue, there is a lane that goes north-south. Do you see any engineering reason why they couldn't put a curb cut and an approach into that parking lot opposite that lane right there? You betcha.
So through the chair, there definitely is potential to do that. There are quite a few utilities at this location, so probably they want to be on either side of those existing utilities and avoid this gas line. And I think there's some pedestals and stuff like that. But yeah, there is potential to have a driveway.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. Do we need a motion to accept that? I will entertain a motion. Councillor Blackmore.
Thank you, Chair O'Connor. I would move that committee receive this report for committee received this report for information. Sometimes I have a hard time remembering who's committee and who's council.
Thank you. Call a question. That is carried unanimously. Thank you. Is it in order to ask for to expedite this water problem, or can I direct that back to administration? I don't think 3 years is satisfactory enough, and I don't think that's fair to the people that have been dealing with this for a long time, and including the fence. So can I make a motion, or somebody else make a motion to direct? I'd love to direct this back to administration, to be on the appropriate committee, to do, what's that? To push this back to come up with an expedited solution to this drainage and fencing issue.
I would make that motion for Chair O'Connor because I don't think he can make a motion.
Thank you, Councillor Blackmore. Call the question.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Connor. So is the intent of the motion that administration would bring back solution to the problem, and then ultimately we would need a funding source after we brought it back to committee? So we would bring back a recommended solution for and I guess, is it all aspects that the delegation is asking to be addressed? So there's the fence, there's the lane, there's 97A Street where there's a crossfall that they were looking for. At least that would be something we would potentially explore. However, we do have drainage agreements across the property in the former Montrose Avenue site. So I guess perhaps just specificity that we're looking to address all their concerns, or are we looking to, I guess to be quite specific on what it is that you would like us to bring back?
I think the drainage, and I'll let Councillor Blackmore, if you would like to go ahead.
I think, Director Glavin, that I would like to see you address all the issues. It doesn't mean that we are asking for a solution that's immediate to all those issues, but if we could have a better understanding of costs, general costs, and timelines for the property and in all aspects that the delegation brought forward, I think that would be helpful for us to make a decision regarding anything that might come from that report.
Thank you. Is that clearer?
Thank you, Chair O'Connor. Yes, I think that's clear enough. So ultimately, we would explore these, bring it back to a future standing committee meeting. Ultimately, after that, this would need to go to a council meeting for a funding sources. We'd need to amend the capital plan to do anything with this in this fiscal year.
Thank you. Councillor Lehners.
Yeah. Well, it doesn't hurt to find out some costs, but I think we always have to be leery that, just because someone asks for something, that we don't always have to give it to them. We can agree with them, but some of these problems are long standing. You know, when I see a $400,000 access and I see a $100,000 catch basin repair and I see a $50,000 fence and a $30,000 driveway, we're talking about $600,000 or $700,000 to essentially fix a long-standing problem and to direct some pedestrians out of the way, and I can spend $600,000 somewhere else. So I don't mind finding out the costs and potentially some timelines when it comes to, you know, maybe it's best suited to do 98th Street. We've already got some money budgeted, so that's not going to cost us anything more. But I would be curious to see what that driveway approach option that I discussed, as opposed to that new access, to include both in the estimate if we are going to do it. And like Councillor Blackmore said, you know, it might just be a accept it for information report, but I think they are looking for a little bit more information. But and so I can support that, but I'd like that driveway curb cut option included. And not to say that I'm not sure where I'll vote in the future, but if we can add that, that would be helpful.
Mayor Clayton and then O'Connor.
Friendly amendment. I don't love the preparing an expedited solution to the issues. I wondered if Chair Blackmore would be comfortable with administration bringing back a report, including options with pricings in regards to the issues as presented by the delegation.
Certainly, I'd be happy to have the expedited word removed. Phrase removed.
Okay, and can we reread the motion now that it isn't?
So the motion reads, committee direct administration to bring back a report with options including pricing to the issues presented by the delegation and report back to committee.
Okay, and whenever you're ready, call the question. Thank you. That was carried unanimously. And one last point, this question is to Director Manuel. Was there not an agreement in place for some of these items to have happened in the last couple of years with Wapiti House? I just want that as a clarification.
I wouldn't say that there's ever been an agreement for these items to happen with Wapiti House. Certainly, Wapiti House wants to be a good neighbor and certainly is mindful of the impacts that can exist on adjacent properties. But Wapiti House themselves is very, very restricted in their financial capacities to execute these asks that are being made. And as I was mentioning, the fence, for instance, is something both parties were in agreement with. However, the fence without the access change is not going to make any meaningful difference at this point. So there's just some additional complexities.
Okay. Thank you. And we'll move on. There is no correspondence. Is there any other business under 6? Seeing none. Bylaw and policy review. Seeing none. And go to 8 outstanding items list.
Thank you, Chair O'Connor. 2 updates today. We dealt with item 1179, Development Incentives and Grants Program, as well as item 1163, the Wapiti House site. However, the new motion will create a new outstanding item list item for that one.
Okay, and I need a motion to accept that report. Councillor Lainers. Okay, that was carried unanimously. With that, we will adjourn for
10 minutes.
10 minutes. Thank you.
With that adjournment, there may be a shuffle of the order of the upcoming committee reports. Thanks.